I want to continue that in my life, not just creating a great life for my family, but lifting my eyes up and saying, how can I partner with God in a way to really leave a legacy impact in the lives of other people? There were so many people in my life like you, Brett, that I saw. Maybe people wouldn't see the potential, but I saw that potential was there because I was that kid in the beginning.
I would say that of all those 50 couples, at least, they would say Dan is one of the most impactful, influential people in my life, right? So God took what was weak, turned it into strength, and then he multiplied it.
My faith, doing good is like giving clean water to your kids.
Welcome to the Capital Gains Tax Solutions Podcast, where we believe most high net worth individuals and those who help them, they struggle with clarifying their capital gains tax deferral options. Not having a clear plan is the enemy, and using a proven tax deferral strategy such as the Deferred Sales Trust is an amazing way for you to exit highly appreciated assets, eliminate the need for the 1031 exchange, so you can create and preserve more wealth. I'm your host today, Brett Swarts, and each and every episode I'm joined by some of the best real estate, financial wealth, and business minds in the world, where they share their ideas, deal stories, and secrets, so together we can make complex tax deferral strategies simple and passive income plans achievable. Hey, I'm so excited. This is a special episode today. I'm here with a dear friend of mine, long-term mentor, and a person who has been one of the most significant impacts in my life as a young child. We'll talk a little bit more about that. But he's originally from the Sacramento, California area. He's also a team member now with Capital Gains Tax Solutions. He has a heart for ministry. He has a heart for impact. He loves Jesus, and he's here to talk to us a little bit about his story, as well as opportunity at the end to make an impact alongside Capital Gains Tax Solutions and everything we're doing here. Please welcome to the show with me, Dan Palmer. Dan, how are we doing?
Hey, fantastic. Thanks for that introduction. So much wrapped into what you just shared that they don't know about, just with our history and background and what God's done in our life, but also the opportunities we've had to serve Him and get out of our comfort zones and reach people that otherwise we probably never would have met and make a huge impact.
Absolutely. And we'll dive into all of that today. In fact, we're going to be talking about, it's basically a journey to the water of Jesus wells, right, with Dan Palmer. But before we go there, I want to go way back, right, to get people an opportunity to get to know you a little bit more. So tell us a little bit more about your story. You know, you're growing up as well, and then let's move into some of your focuses over the years, and then we'll move into your focus of where you're at right now.
Yeah, God's been really faithful, Brett. I mean, you know this story from beginning to end. I met you when you were probably 12, 13 years old in middle school, actually, and I had a heart for youth ministry then, but a big part of it goes even further back for me, back to growing up in a fatherless home and what it's like for young men trying to become masculine, godly men in a fallen world with no guidance and nobody investing in their lives. And so I've just, God was so faithful to put people in my life who cared about an impact, who cared about reaching outside of their comfort zones and giving something to the next generation. And I mean, I can just list a couple. One, my youth pastor who invested into me. He's the reason I went into youth ministry. I went to UCLA and graduated, and everyone's like, oh, you're going to immediately go into business or into some sort of money-making venture. And I was like, no, actually, the greatest thing that ever happened to me is the investment someone made in me. And then I was able to pay it forward with you and that incredible group that God gave us during those years. But also, fathers of my friends. One thing that stands out in particular is a backpacking trip that two of my friends were going on with their dads. And for whatever reason, their dad said, hey, Dan's growing up in a fatherless home. He's never been able to do something like that. We should invite him. And I agreed to go, and I was 15 at that time, and my life was kind of upside down because my dad had made some bad decisions, and I was embarrassed, and all of a sudden I got a single mom, me and my two brothers, and my three adopted sisters trying to make it, and we were poor, and that was embarrassing, and didn't have a dad around, that was embarrassing. When you score a touchdown and your mom's ringing a bell saying go defense, it's just not as cool, and then you're walking off, and your friends are like, great game, son, from their dads, and you don't have anyone there. Just painful, and you're trying to figure out, where am I going to fit in and what am I lacking? And these men took me on a backpacking trip for the entire week. And at the end, they sat me down. They told their kids, hey, go fish or something. And they pulled me aside. They didn't have to do this. And they just sat down and said, Dan, we've been watching you, and you're charismatic, and you're adventurous, and you're smart. And if you were willing to work hard, you could really do something with your life. And I remember looking at them saying, do you really think so? Which is funny. You know, I'm very confident, very forward thinking, very ambitious. But no adult male had ever looked me in the eyes and said that to me before, and lit a fire in me to get after it. And so I got after my grades. I got after my work. I got into UCLA. Neither of my parents had gone to college. Got into UCLA, paid my way through UCLA, and then instantly jumped into the youth pastor position as soon as I graduated in the group that you and your cousins were a part of, and your brother. And yeah, God's been really faithful, and I want to continue that in my life, not just creating a great life for my family, but lifting my eyes up and saying, how can I partner with God in a way to really leave a legacy impact in the lives of other people?
Absolutely amazing. And by the way, Daniel Palmer, you can find him on LinkedIn. And we're going to also talk about ways to connect with Dan as well here in the future. But a couple things I want to pull out for the audience that really stuck with me, right? So the growing up in the father's home, but yet the Lord still provided father figures and those that were in your life to specifically speak, life into you and encouragement and belief, right? And it's a similar thing that I went through a little bit as well, and that you were that for me, right? And the very fact that the legacy didn't have to stop because you were in a father's home, the Lord provided, and you were also helped. My parents were divorced. I didn't have a dad around much, but he was there when he was there. He was great, but it was just tough in the divorced home. But having that was so impactful that you passed that legacy on. And so just to talk about the power of belief in the spoken word of encouragement, because I believe one of the gifts you've been given is a gift of encouragement, of belief, right? And yet somebody, planted that seed at a yearly age, and now that is the gift that's, harvested so many people, so many lives over all these years.
Yeah, I think, God sets you on a path, and it's your responsibility to learn the lessons. And, we would have a pathway that we would map out for ourselves, and it would always be the easiest possible path. But we would never become the people that God intended us to be if we didn't have the tension, the difficulty, the struggle that requires you to persevere and grow and really transform, become something greater than what you thought you could be. And I had a lot of people that did that in my life, but for me, I always look back and I would pray, God, make my life easier. And I remember one of my mentors said, maybe if you were stronger, God would put you in a more difficult part of the battle. And I think that's what happened with my past and my background. I realized that there was a lack, but the lack created the tension that created enough space for God to show up in my life and do something special. And out of that, I became very perceptive to other people. And, for instance, you're just a kid, in middle school, trying to figure out, is there a girl around here I like, and what sport am I going to play? And you were good at the sports, but I was spanking you back then, and you're trying to figure out. But I could look, and there were so many people in my life like you, Brett, that I saw, and maybe people wouldn't see the potential, but I saw that potential was there because I was that kid. That in the beginning, maybe people would say, oh, you're not going to amount to much. And, it's tough growing up in a church. And, my dad made some bad decisions, and you're growing up and you're wondering, like, hey, what do people think about me? Do they want me dating their daughter? Do they want the kid from the broken home? Do they want the kid, that has some crazy stuff that's happened around? I had nothing to do with any of it, but it kind of sticks to you, and you have to persevere and grow. And so for me, I think that's a gift that God gave me. And so I would just encourage anyone listening, if you're going through a difficult time now, or you've been through difficult, instead of taking pity on yourself and regretting it, look for opportunities for God to take that to shape you into something stronger, more outward focused, wiser. For me, I think if I just grew up and had everything I had, I only would have thought of myself. But because people invested into me, I started turning my head on a swivel and going, hey, where are those other kids that have a ton of potential, but no one's invested into them? I youth pastored with some buddies of mine that came from really stable homes, and they would always find the really solid kids that had incredible families, and I would always kind of get the outliers. But those outliers are like the entrepreneurs that we work with now. They're the ones that look at the world a little different, that have a little more on their shoulders, that take a little bit more responsibility because there is no one else to take responsibility for them. And I was always drawn to that because I believe that God can shape that into something incredible.
So beautiful. One thing that comes to mind is the verse says, God's power is made perfect in weakness, right? And although at the time when you were younger, that might have been the weakness, that you didn't have that someone speaking into you, but then God took that and he strengthened that and he forged that, and then he used that as a weapon against those that don't necessarily have father figures or those speaking life or encouragement to be, to forge and to strengthen. And I can tell you firsthand, that's what you did for me, right?
Yeah.
And I want to thank you on, here, that you were a huge part of my life. And looking back, the Lord put a couple people, some basketball coaches, some football, but like spiritually and all of the above, right? The fact that I had an older, role model, I also had some cousins that you're also pouring into, right? So you multiplied this youth group in a way, God through you multiplied youth group. Phenomenal. One of the best, communities, connections that I think looking back, everyone would say that was such a special, 4, 5, 6 years. I'm not sure how many years.
It really was, yeah.
And it was dynamic. And all of the, now you've gone on to officiate probably 50 weddings from those groups, right? And I would say that of all those 50 couples, at least, they would say Dan is one of the most impactful, influential people in my life, right? So God took what was weak, turned it into strength, and then he multiplied it. Yeah. I think because you were faithful, right?
Yeah.
And you were uncompromising in your devotion to him. So talk about what helped you to forge that discipline to be uncompromising when the Lord wanted you to do something, you do it.
Well, I was, trying to find identity and purpose apart from God because the anger I had towards my dad. And so what I realized, I was really funny and really outgoing. So I went out, through my middle school years. And I went to middle school that was 7th, 8th, 9th grade. So my freshman year was in middle school, which was awesome. Because normally you think of a freshman, but we were like running the school. We were 9th grade and our football team was there, basketball team, everything. I played all the sports. And I just remember thinking, if people liked me and if the right girls liked me and if I was good at sports, man, then I'd be happy. And I remember we had our jamboree my 9th grade year, and I scored 9 touchdowns in the jamboree. Just when I was playing tight end, they were just launching it up, and I was just catching it and running for touchdowns. And I remember on the way there, I had never played junior football, and the head cheerleader was there, and she was like, "You're not going to be any good. You've never even played before." And I was like, "Okay." I didn't lack for confidence. So I went out there and scored all these touchdowns. And then on the bus ride home, she's like, "Can I wear your jersey?" You remember those? And I just thought, man, how shallow is that? Like before the game, you're like taunting me and talking trash. And then just because I'm good at this thing, all of a sudden you think I matter and you want to connect yourself to me. And even as a 9th grader, I already saw through that and said, I don't want to pursue that. And let me tell you, Brett, 90% of the people in our world are pursuing that to this day, regardless of their age. That I got to be successful. I got to accomplish something so people will like me and respect me and admire me, and I'll get a bit of power, a bit of reputation, and then I'll be happy. And I realized early, and I just think that's an epiphany from God, that no, that isn't the way to go. Like that's not real. And so it was in 9th grade when I went on my first missions trip, and that's a long other story, but God got a hold of my heart. And I remember I went off, and I had been there for all the wrong reasons. I made my youth pastor put me on the team of this girl I like. I said, the only way I'll go if I'm on her team. And I wanted to get a Switchblade, and I wanted to get M100s. So that's like the only reason I'm there. But God got a hold of my heart, and I remember coming home saying, I'll never be the same again. If that's what God's like, if I can come with all the wrong reasons, and he'll still use me to impact the lives of other people, I'm going to walk with him for the rest of my life. And I lost, short term, a lot of my friends. This is what it's like. You come back and you're like, oh, you're not doing that with us anymore? Because I'm like, hey, the things we did before, I'm not doing that anymore. I'm different. And then you kind of get ostracized in a way. And so for a while, all of a sudden it's Friday night and I'm watching a movie with my mom. Like, this is lame. But a strange thing happens. They watch you over time and they're trying to win you back. And then they accept, wow, you did the hard thing. You had the guts to actually step out from what was convenient and easy and accepted. And then all of a sudden, when problems came into their life, who do you think they're going to for advice? Because you've already shown character. You've already shown strength. You've already shown the ability to stand alone and do what everyone knew was right, but nobody had the courage to do. And so all of a sudden, I gained all my friends back, but in a leadership position. And that's when I realized that's the secret of the kingdom of God. Remember, he says, with the measure you use, it will be measured back to you and more. Parable of the sower. With the measure you use, it'll be measured back to you and more. And when we do what's right and when we trust God, it might be hard in the beginning, whether it's character or honesty. It might be easier to tell a lie. It might be easier to cut the corner. But once people know you've lost trust, how hard is that to get back? But if you do what's right, it might be difficult in the beginning, but all of a sudden a handshake will do. A word will do. Because they know your character. They know that you're trustworthy. And then all of a sudden God 10X's you in terms of your influence and your leadership and your impact in the lives of others. And so I started learning those lessons very early in my life, and God just kept opening new doors. And I basically made 2 pledges to God, Brett, when he called me into ministry. I said, first of all, if you're really God and you're really there, you're going to have to open the door for me. I know that I'm charismatic and I'm outgoing. I don't want to kick the door down and end up being in places that you don't want me to be. So if you're really God, I believe you have the power to open the door to the path that you want me to do. And then the second thing I said, if you open that door, I'll walk through it, even if it seems too big for me. Even if I feel like I don't have the capabilities or the giftedness, or if I'm scared, like if you open that door, I'll step through it. And so I started down that journey of just saying yes to things that maybe other people would miss out on because it was difficult. I mean, honestly, even joining capital gains tax legislation, this isn't my background, but I got a guy that I love and that I respect and that I've watched you build your business, and you approach me and I'm like, I didn't open this door. Like, God opened this, so I'm going to step through it and see what God has for me. And I think that's a good way to live life. When God opens the door, you step through it and you say, God, what do you have for me? I'm not going to let fear direct my steps. I'm going to let you direct my steps.
Absolutely amazing, Dan. So much there. I'm going to pull out a couple key nuggets there, but I hope everyone's listening, getting the encouragement here with Dan, the gift of encouragement, challenge, and fortitude to press forward despite challenges and obstacles, and being faithful. And what comes to mind is stewardship versus ownership, right? At a certain point, you kept stepping through the doors, you kept asking for larger things, you kept being faithful, and all of a sudden you go, wow, Lord's really, I think of kind of like Joseph, right? At a certain point, he's faithful in the prison, and then he's led to be at the top, number 2 in the whole country of Egypt, right? At the time. And so you look at that and you go, now it's a stewardship part. Now the part you look, oh my gosh, the Lord's put me in these places. So talk about the idea of stewardship versus ownership, right? And how the Lord has taught you how to be a steward over the years of the platform, of the integrity, of all the things that he's blessed you with and you've stepped into.
Yeah, I think ministry is similar to business, and it's different in one way that I'll get to, but it's similar in the sense that the better you are, the more work you create for yourself, right? A lot of people can start a ministry, like you remember Celebration, leading is a worship and mission service that I led for 5 years that had over 1,000 college and career people at it every Sunday night. It was the biggest service our church had. It was all young people, but it just kept growing and growing. And then you're still counseling. I got the high school students that I worked with who I'm still in their life. And I think during that time, I'm doing weddings and stuff from people that were in high school when I was ministering. So you never lose anything, but you keep gaining. And you realize, like, eventually, this is beyond me. This is too big. I don't have enough bandwidth to do all of this. And so you have to be a steward in the sense that Jesus was, where, if you read the Gospels, Jesus didn't heal every person. He didn't feed every person. He kept saying things like, I only do what I see my Father doing. And, there was times that he literally went up, everyone's waiting to be healed, and he goes up into the wilderness to pray. Or he's exhausted, but instead he gets away on his own. And I think that's part of the stewardship part of saying, this is too big for me. But God in his grace allows me the dignity to do big things. And not only that, he gives me the power to do it. He gives me his Holy Spirit to indwell me. And then he also gives me spiritual gifts that I get to use for his kingdom. And so when we step into that, all of a sudden we find that we have more power than we thought, but we become, intentional about what we do. And, you can't meet every need, But you start to understand when God opens a door to a specific need, we step into that. And so for me, it was the Water of Jesus wells. It was going to Uganda. That was a door that 100% God, I didn't even want to go there.
Talk about that. How did it all get started, and how did you open the door?
I mean, it's a long story. Part of the celebration years, we grew to 1,000 people. We'd have, 350 people in college group on Thursday night.
This is back in like 1998,
this is, yeah,
2000,
before
2000. Yeah, this is.
I adult pastored.
Yeah.
But I was working with young people, and I loved it because I was just starting my family, so I had young kids, and college students are available. So for me, I didn't want to CEO a ministry. I still had the heart to relationally engage with people and to actually know them and be known by them. And so, it's hard when you're doing youth ministry and the kids are in high school and then you do youth group in the evening and I had basketball league, we're going to the men's league and I got a bunch of high school students with me and we're killing people. We were doing all that stuff, hanging out on the weekends, and then all of a sudden you have kids and you're like, I can't do that, but I don't want to just sit in an office all day and then meet someone at 3 and 4 because that's when they're available. So college students are, they make their own schedules. So I would just meet with people all day long and it started really expanding and growing. But I was also in charge of missions then. And so you got these 1,000 people on Sunday nights. And every week we would pray for a different part of the world. And then we'd put, 9, 10 teams together, train for 3 months. And then those teams would go out all over the world and do ministry and then come back and share. It's a very, very powerful thing. But, I led a group to Africa. It was the first time I'd ever been to Africa. I'd already been to Papua New Guinea. I'd been to Sao Paulo, Brazil. I'd been to, all over the place. And I got an opportunity to go to Africa. Africa has a charm to it, right? Everyone wants to go to Africa, go on a safari, see the people there. And so I went on this trip and, it wasn't really even a part of our trip, but we met this guy named Peter. Peter was from a village and he was helping us. We were working with an organization called Hard Relief, Help Africa Relief and Development. And it just so happened they were installing a well while we were there. And we weren't doing it. They were just doing it and we were there. And we went there and, I was talking with Peter. I said, hey, do you have a well in your village? And he was like, yeah, we got one about a year ago. I said, tell me about that. He said, everyone was dying. He said, in my family, we were seven kids that were born, but only my sister and I made it past the age of 3. And I'm like, is that normal? He goes, yeah, that's normal. People were dying we'd have a funeral every week. He's all, and then the well went in and people were still sick, but we stopped having funerals. People stopped dying. He's all, in 6 weeks, people were sick, but they weren't dying. 6 months, people weren't even sick anymore. He said, I looked at my sister and I said, do you think it's the water? I have no idea. I saw their water. It's probably like as big as the space between us, grayish green. They bathe in it. They wash their dishes in it. They feed it to their babies. It is horrific. The animals drink out of it. So at night when the people aren't around, the animals come, they drink. They go to the bathroom, defecate all around it, around this water hole. And Uganda's beautiful. Uganda's called the Pearl of Africa. Everything's green and growing. So even though it's blazing hot, it rains every day. A little, like maybe 10 minutes, it'll pour like crazy, and then it's 110 again. But when it rains and it downpours, all that gets washed into the water source, and then they come, and unless they're disciplined to boil it, which is just boil your water, well, they don't have a stove. You know how hard it is in a place like that to find sticks when every other person's trying to find sticks to cook dinner? Finding a stick is really hard. And then you got to try to heat up water hot enough to burn off an outdoor. It's really, so guess what? They just drink it. And for generations, they've done that, and people die, the weak die, the strong live. And, I brought Pastor David here, and I was worried because he wanted to try pizza and gigantic burgers that were all grease. I'm like, hey, this is all stuff you've never had before. You're probably going to feel really sick. Oh, no, I feel great. I'm like, if he can drink the water in Africa, he can eat any of the bad food we have in America, no problem. He was eating ice cream at 4 a.m. and for breakfast, but they don't have refrigeration. So, just being there with him, I watched that. And I said, how much does this cost? He said, it's probably $4,000. I said, how many people would use it? He said, probably 200 families would walk from like a 1 mile radius to that well. I said, 200 families each having 7 kids, but only 2 survive. Like, how many lives are one single well saving? And I was a youth pastor then. I was making no money. But I was like, I have some friends. I bet you I could go home and raise $4,000 and save all these lives. I got home, busy, a lot of other stuff going. I didn't do it. So for 10 years, I didn't go back. But I had in my mind to do that. For 10 years, I didn't go back. And then, so fast forward, this was probably 12 years ago. I'm preaching on a Sunday morning, and I'm talking about discipleship, leadership. Said, God gives you innate passions. And anybody watching this, you could probably look in your own heart and say, what are the things that get me excited? It's different for every person. That's part of having the image of God in you. We're like satellites, and we each have a piece of who God is. And sometimes we think our piece is the only piece, but when I know you, I can look to you and say God's this big. I can only see this side of him. But with you, you're seeing this side of him. And so when I get to know you and I build a relationship with you and I see your passion, I see another piece of the heart of God. And so I was talking about this, and I was saying, God gives you this passion, and then he gives you an experience. And the experience normally lights that innate passion into a flame. So it's there. Maybe you've never seen anything to make it come to life. But all of a sudden you see something, and this thing that's been in you for a long time all of a sudden comes to life. And then out of that, God will give you an opportunity. And in the opportunity, you have 2 choices. You can say no. That's what I did to the wells 10 years before. And that was actually my example. I said, man, I could have been a part of something special. I could have been a part of a bunch of lives being saved. Not that I'm responsible for anyone that died, but I literally could have walked with God back to Africa, installed a couple wells, built relationships, met kids that otherwise wouldn't have survived past the age of 6 weeks or 1 year or 2 years, and watched that thrive and grow in that community, but I was too busy. So that you can do that. You can say no, or you can say yes. And so when you say no, you stay in your comfort zone. And in my life, I would say when I say no to God, when I tell people I'm bored, I feel like God's distant. My prayer life's stagnant. When I hear people say things like that, I say, well, that's because you're saying no to God. You're in your comfort zone. You don't need him. Like, why wouldn't it be stagnant? You are the master of everything in your life. You are in control. You are comfortable in every other area. Or you say yes. And when you say yes, it drives you out of that comfort zone. And all of a sudden you're like, God, I need you. And that's when you feel that closeness. You create the space for him to show up and do something amazing in your life. And so that's what happened with that situation. I was saying, I said no, I should have said yes, and I missed out.
So let me capture some of that, Dan. Like you're just saying, this is really powerful, right? So, and I love the way you broke that down. God gives us innate passions, right? Something that's a part of our heart that he stirs in us to care really deeply about. And not all of us have all of the passions of the Lord, but we each have our piece. And for that piece, the Lord gives you an opportunity to see that and make a difference, which is the next thing. He gives you some kind of experience that lights that up and kind of...
Yeah, you might not know you even have that passion until the experience reveals it, because you come to life when that thing comes in. Right. It could be a lot of different things, but it could be encouragement. It could be building someone up. It could be, like there's a big passion that I have in a lot of my friends' hearts for sex trafficking, and they work with Agape International Missions, and they're partnering with that. We've seen Tim Tebow speak, and he talks about special needs. He talks about the sex trafficking also, but you don't know that you have that when you're 12 and you've never been around someone in that situation, but you see it, and something in your heart just moves towards it.
Right. Yeah, and then so the next thing is once you experience that, then God gives us an opportunity. It's a yes or a no. Right, it's a yes or a no, and then when you say no, you're standing in that comfort zone, and I feel like something almost inside of you kind of dies a little bit, or at least it shrinks back, or it just gets stagnant, and that's part of it's why you want to say yes, right? Because then it's going to drive you out of that comfort zone. It's going to be tough. But on the other side of that, you start to see the blessing and the impact. So talk about saying yes after 10 years of basically, kind of forgetting about it, and then it comes full circle.
Great question, Brett. And that's why I say it was a God thing. And when God opens a door, I try to say yes and step through it, because that's how I've decided I want to live my life. And so 10 years go by, I preached this sermon that I'm just telling you about on a Sunday. Sunday I preached that. Tuesday my phone rings. Now, it's a student named Jonathan who was in my college group when I did that Uganda trip. He was one of the students. I was the leader. I was the college pastor, and he was one of the students. And he was one of the 12 people I took on that trip to Uganda where we saw that well get installed. And he calls me out of the blue and he says, "Hey, I don't know if you know this, but ever since you took me, it just lit my heart on fire for Uganda, and I've gone back every year since then." Not with our church. He was with another church in town. I had no idea he was doing that. He was going back. He said, "But now, I finished all my studies. I got my master's, and now I'm a professor at William Jessup University, where you played basketball." Mm-hmm. He's like, "I'm a professor there now, so I don't want to go and do VBS and do all that. Like, I want to go and I want to teach men about authentic biblical manhood. Like, how do you take responsibility for your church? How do you become a leader? How do you lead in your family? How do you love your wife the way that Christ loved the church? How do you be present for your kids?" He's like, "This is what my passion is." And I'm going and I'm doing a pastor's conference, I'm doing a men's conference, and I'm doing a general conference all over 12 days. And I'm going to speak probably 25 times. And you popped into my head as someone that could teach with me. And I was like, "Did you just listen to my sermon from 2 days ago?" Because that was what I thought. He's like, "What are you talking about?" "No, I'm just calling you. This is about me. This is my trip that I'm going on." And I said, because I just talked about this. I talked about how God gave me an opportunity and I said no to it. And I missed out on his blessing. I missed out on something that would have brought me to life and left a legacy impact that I would remember even to the end of my life and probably beyond. He said, "No, I have no idea what you're talking about." I said, "Okay, I'll tell you what. I'm really busy." I had 2 kids at this point, young kids. You know how crazy that is. You have more than me. But I said, "Talk to your contact there and see if he can do wells. If he can do wells, then I'll go. If not, I mean, I can speak here. I've been pastoring I can speak 20 times next week if I wanted to. I don't need to go to Uganda to do that." He calls the guy, calls me back. He's like, "Dan, you're not going to believe this." I talked to him. The guy that does the wells in their district attends his church. He'll do it for the Uganda price as a ministry. Now, most of the time when they see white people in Uganda, I say they don't see you as a white person. They see you as a green person. They just see the dollars. They know you're bringing the dollars. But this guy, like, in terms of organizations, we've done wells. Nobody else can do it for the price that we've been able to do, and that's part of his gift. But so I said, "Okay, well, I'll do 2 wells and I'll go, or I'm going to consider it." And so I got off the phone with him. I said, "Wow, like, this is crazy. I don't have time for this." And so I started bartering with God, which I tell people you shouldn't do. But I said, "God, I think I probably need $12,000 if you want me to do this. And so I'm going to put 12 people down, people from my childhood, people from UCLA, ministry people that I know. I'm just going to take 12 people. I'd never done any fundraising in my life." I said, and I'll call these people on Saturday. So I preached on Sunday. Guy called me on Tuesday. I said, I'll call these people on Saturday. If you provide $12,000, then I'll take it as a sign from you that I'm supposed to go. And if you don't, I'm going to take it as permission not to go, because I'm coaching Little League. I have my kids all over the place. My wife's going to be mad because I'm gone again. Like, it's just too much. I don't think the timing's right. It's never convenient to lead. And so Saturday comes around. I was coaching both of my kids' Little League games. In between the games, I went in my backyard and got on the phone. Called the first person. He's like, "I'm in for 1,000. Called the second person. "Hey, this is just a weird thing that's happened. I'm just calling people, asking." "I'm in for 10,000. I'm in for 4,000. I had like $20,000 in like an hour. And like, what do you say to that? Like, I was thinking, I'm going to get $50 here, 100, and people are like, "I'll do 10K. I'll do," because for them, they're saying, this is so important. This is something we take for granted. They're picturing their kids. What if I had to give dirty water to my kids? I'd want to give them clean water, but what if all I had was dirty water and they could just empathize and understand? And so I had the money, then I had to go. So I went, we did those 2 wells. It was unbelievable. So I went back and I talked to my buddy who was a pastor. He said, "I want to go. I want to see it." I said, "Let's do a couple more." We did 3 more wells, and we had 5. And then there was a kid who I spoke at a lot of camps and conferences, and he was just a kid that was helping at a Catalina Island camp when I spoke. Actually, your cousin went to it with me, Nick. And we just became friends, and we stayed connected all the way through. And he became a youth pastor partly because of the impact that I had on him. And then, he said, I want to go. I said, can you meet me in Dubai in 3 months? He said, yeah. He goes, we're going to do 4 wells. I said, I'm going to do 5 more. So we went back to 9 more wells. So all of a sudden this thing's expanding. As it's going, we're still teaching, and we're teaching the pastors, we're teaching the men. And so we end up in this situation, Brett, where I preach and I talk about like, hey, baptism's a public proclamation of your faith. It's a chance to tell people I've been changed. Like I got changed when I was 14 years old and I went on that missions trip. And it's just letting the world know this is what God's done in my life. And Pastor David, who we're working with, he's like, how many of you have never been baptized? All these hands go up. He's like, you will meet us here tomorrow at noon and we will go to the Nile to be baptized. We show up the next day, over 400 people are there to be baptized. We load up in these giant trucks. We drive down there. I'm in the Nile. I just went there to do a couple wells. Now I'm in the Nile baptizing these people in the Nile as they publicly proclaim their faith. The imam of the local mosque gave his life to Christ. He said, I hated that you brought this well here. He's like, but I need water. He's also, every day I just have to accept that Jesus gave me this water. And it's very different because the Muslims don't let the Christians use their wells. They're unclean. But we say this, do you know our God? Our God causes the rain to fall on the righteous and the wicked. Our God loves people regardless of how they respond to him, and he gives them a chance to repent and turn to him. And this imam was like, I've never heard anything like that. Gave his life to Christ, and we're baptizing him in the Nile. And so it just turned into this great thing. And so, when you talk about stepping out of your comfort zone and taking a risk, and when God opens a door, having the courage to step through, that initial step might be a big thing. But sometimes it's just the tip of the iceberg to something much bigger. So I think of the thousands of people who are alive now because of the 40 wells that we've already done. 200 families per well. In Peter's family, 2 out of 7 lived past the age of 3. Imagine how big of a just life impact. Who knows? Maybe that kid's the next Bill Gates, the next Elon Musk. You don't know. They're alive now. They're made in the image of God. They have their own passions and their own dreams, and they're going to have opportunities that spiral into impacting other people. And now you're a part of that process. You're not the cause of it. God worked through you, but you said yes. And now you become a vehicle, a receptacle for God to do something special in your life. I've taken all 3 of my kids to Uganda. They were kind of scared to go, but they go and they're like, their worldview is enlarged. They're like, our dad's doing something like beyond our little community and our little league and our school and the little college. Like he's looking at the world from a big perspective, that there's this great globe filled with people and there's a God that loves them all, even though I've never met any of them. And so I think anybody listening can do something like it. It doesn't have to be water. It doesn't have to be wells. What's your passion that God needs to fan into flame? What's that thing that constantly has been on your heart, maybe once a year, maybe once a decade, maybe every day for the last 10 years that you've been saying, no, I don't have the skills. I don't have the resources. This is too much. I'm too busy. I'm too scared. That's the thing that you want to step into. You don't have to step into my thing. If you want to, we could use you, but you don't have to. You can step into your thing and watch God expand it into something incredible.
Absolutely amazing. So much there. And rewind that, and please rewind that and go through it and again and be thinking. And I pray if you're a believer, right? If you have faith, pray and ask the Lord to reignite the opportunity for what's been in your heart to make a difference and making an impact. I kind of want to bring it full circle now about what we're planning, right? And the Lord's planning with us.
Can I just say one more thing?
Yeah.
Because I know not everyone watching this is a Christian, is a follower of Christ, and that's totally fine. One of the things I love about water, I like what comes out of it. I call it water of Jesus well. And what I tell the people there is, hey, I'm here. It's 2024. And I'm this dude from America that happened to be in this little village that generations of, they have family land, they're tribal. People have lived there for generations and generations. Like God ordained in this moment for me to be here. I don't know why. Maybe your grandma prayed. Maybe you were praying. Maybe it was 5 generations saying if we could just have clean water for our tribe. And I just say, today's the day of the Lord's favor. Today's the day where he answered it. And for me, that's a significant part of what I do. But if you're here and you're like, hey, that isn't important to me, that's okay. Water is important to you. When you look at your child and you think, would I give him grayish green water that's filled with the waste of cows and animal? Like, as a parent, as a person with 3 kids, and it really is an analogy to our fatherhood too, that I've tried to grab from Africa. I say, like, you can only give your kids what you have. And if you're filled with dirty water, anger and hate and unforgiveness and all those things that we can harbor in our heart, guess what you give to your kid? Just like those African parents are giving the dirty water because that's all they have. And they might be saying, son, daughter, if I had something better, I would give it to you. I mean, isn't that the cry of every parent? As a fatherless kid, oftentimes I tell my sons, I'm doing my best. I've never seen this. I don't know. I have a lack. I'm limited because of this broken part of my past. But you have to believe me, son. If I had it, I would give it to you. That's my heart. If I had it, I don't know how, because I'm wounded. I'm broken. I'm like sometimes those African people with the dirty water. But like, we have the ability with our kids to give them something clean and noble and good and worthy. And we follow our passions to serve other people. Our kids are watching and they're saying, whoa, this is good. This isn't greed and selfishness and anger and, like competitive, putting other people down. This is like what makes someone who's successful great. They hold the gain with an open hand and say, now I'm resourced to make an impact. When you're poor, you can't make an impact. You barely can provide for the people around you. But when God blesses you with success and wealth, all of a sudden now you're resourced to make that impact. And I would just encourage, even if you're not a follower of God and you have that resource, it's the same thing. You can make an impact in a certain way in this world, feeding, clothing, taking kids like I did and say, hey, where are the kids that people think are going to fail because they have a background that's unsavory, that has no fault of theirs whatsoever? I'm not responsible for what my dad did. I didn't ask for that. I was born into that. But I'm the master. God gives me the dignity in my life to choose my own path. And so I would just encourage you, if you're watching this saying, hey, I don't know if this relates to me because it's really spiritual. I'm a pastor. That's what I do. But let me tell you, secular people need water. They need food. They need clothing. They need medicine. There's a lot of ways that you can do good. And I would just tell you, even apart from my faith, doing good is like giving clean water to your kids.
Amen. So here's where I want to go with this now. So now you've established the passion, you've established the purpose, you've established the actual execution of these wells, right? You've got it down, and you've got maybe get a little more tactical here now too. So you've taken it from 2 to 4 to over 40 now, and now talk about the vision moving forward. And the opportunity to invite others too, to be a part of that, and what that looks like, and what's kind of on your heart on that.
I think it's funny, I was always, I was the CEO of a nonprofit, which is a different kind of business, but still has all the business stuff in it. I pastored large churches, which has a business element, but I don't want to say, oh, the church is a business. There's business elements, but you don't want it to be. But I look at Uganda, and what happened is like this small startup that started and then scaled. And, the vision was God's vision because I didn't plan on it. I didn't feel I really had the time to go as many times as I've gone. But now we've got 40 wells. What we found out is because they're on communal land, when a kid's parents die either of AIDS or waterborne disease, they're not just thrown into the trash. They're given a small plot of land in the family land, and they farm it, and they become subsistence farmers. They grow food that they can eat, and they trade it at the market to survive. But that's the extent of any possibility in their life, is just that they would eat. That's it. You're not going to school. You're not going to get another career. You're going to literally farm that little plot until you die. There's no one to take care of you. Now, if your parents live, they might scratch up some money and save enough money to send you to school, and you might have a chance to move to the city and get a job. But even that's very rare. Pastor David told me when I first went, the average person earned about $120 a year through trading food that they grow. And so, it's kind of a different world, but, it's scaled. We started off with that, 2 wells in the beginning and a conference. Now we've got 650 kids in a school who are being educated from preschool all the way up to 4th grade, whose parents either died of AIDS or waterborne disease. They're all funded. This is not like an they're all funded by individual churches that are adopting individual kids and from funds that I've raised. And we've done all the wells. We started doing hygiene things. And so, maybe you're a woman watching this, you can imagine hygiene issues for people living in a place like that. And so we send women's teams over, and they talk about cleanliness and periods and all that, like that they have no idea educationally what to do, and bring the supplies, and we help them. This is how you take care of your baby. So we're bringing a lot of other things to help them. So we have the education. We built a church that now has grown to like over 1,000 people, and it's insane. They lift their plastic chairs over their head and wave them around. They're crazy. I get mad when we come and visit, and then they're closing their eyes and raising their hands like white Americans. I'm like, no, lift the chair up and wave it around and dance and go. I love that. I can't move, but I love what you're doing. Don't copy us. We need to copy you. And, but you just see that coming to life. And so you see this thing kind of scaling out into this big thing. But, if you're wondering, we have a process for these wells to go in. We've gone through pastors because they're normally the community leaders in a community like that that's rural, and nobody has a car. I went there 3 times before I saw a car. It's bicycles or they're walking. I mean, it's no lights back when I first started going, and so basically what we're able to do is we take a pastor, they submit an application for their village, we travel there, we meet all of the village elders, and we talk about the hygiene of the well, who's going to be responsible for keeping it clean so it doesn't become dirty itself, who's going to make sure the clean spouts like dried up every day so that you don't get bacteria building in there, who's going to talk to the people about purifying their jerry cans, because you pump clean water from a new well into an old jerry can, you look in it, the bottom's like jet black with mold. And you got to tell them like, hey, if you got a moldy jerry can and you pump clean water in it, the water's dirty. So you got to clean the can and then put the clean water into it. I think Jesus told the parable about that. And, and so, but who's going to teach them that? And so we have a pastor that we train. They work with the community and the well guy to pick a well site. They dig the well, and then that well gets deeded over to the community so that they can't say, this is our well, no one can use it, or charge people to use it. It becomes community property and everybody can use it. And then, we come back with our team and we dedicate. So if you donated to do a well, first of all, God bless you. You're saving lives. You're making a bigger impact than you can ever imagine. But you're welcome to come with us and dedicate the well.
Absolutely.
And we go there, and it's wild. You think about a pump well, and the water comes out. They always want to put it in my hands because I'm so white, like it goes into my hands and it looks so clear in my super white hands, and they just think it's so funny. And, and everyone's dancing and they're singing and they're waving tree branches in the air because they have a pump well in their village that some of them have to walk a mile to every day to get fresh water. But that's how exciting it is. So if you're taking it for granted because you just turned on your faucet, or you just have bottled water in your garage because your faucet water that's clean isn't clean enough for you, just imagine what it's like for the mom that has these kids and they've got to go to a puddle on the ground and fill a jerry can up and give it to their baby. It's a gigantic impact.
Absolutely. So let's break it down, right? So in case someone is feeling moved to give, right?
Yeah.
What does it look like, if they want to, a well or 10 wells or 100 wells?
Yeah.
Like, what does it look like? And what would be if someone were to give that kind of gift, how quickly can it be executed to be able to get the wells in?
So I normally go twice a year personally and install all the wells. And so our connections on the ground there, they dig them, but I have a process for accountability That was important for me. We pick the sites out before we determine the well's going to go on. We take a picture with a landmark in the background with nothing there, and then Pastor David takes pictures as it's being dug so that that's the exact spot that well's going in. And then we go back and we dedicate the well. So it just, for the sake of numbers, if you wanted to do a well, it's probably about $4,000. $4,000 would do an entire well in a village that would serve about 200 families. If you're like, hey, I can only do 1,000, well, that's a quarter well, and you get 4 people together. You don't have to get people together. We'll get people together, and we'll do that well. This has always been something for me. This isn't a business that I do. This isn't, it's just a passion of my heart that God fanned into a flame, and then he gave me an opportunity. I said yes, like I shared before. And so I always tell God, if you provide, I'll go. And so I'm normally shocked. I would go places and someone would shake my hand and I pull my hand away and there's a check in it for $4,000 for a well. I didn't even ask for it. And so when I say this is God's thing, that's really how it's been. And oftentimes I'm telling my wife, I don't know if I can go back. I got malaria last time I went. I've had to take some anti-parasite stuff, so it's been hard as I'm in my 50s now. Like you don't handle as well as when you were 20. And so it's like, man, I'm like kind of paying a little bit of a price. Like maybe it'd be nice, but like God just keeps, so I know that this is what I'm supposed to do. And so I faithfully keep going and keep getting engaged. So if you want to do 10 wells, $40,000 would do 10 wells. And that's not 10 wells like on one street at individual houses. This is 10 wells in different communities with different elders that serves that entire radius of people that are a part of that community. So, a good way to look at it is each well serves about 200 families, about a mile to 2 mile radius. They will walk every day to get the water.
It's not like you have the team in place, you have the accountability in place, you have the process in place. It's just really the capital. And the investment to get it done. And then let's imagine someone wants to give 100 wells, right? Keep going here. What does it look like to kind of scale that out? And then number 2, if someone's giving, is there a way to give in a way that's, we're here talking capital gains tax solutions, right? In a way that's tax advantaged.
Right.
So they can be, good stewards on that side. Is there a creative way to do that?
So I partner with a church that I've been a part of for years and years. It's called District Church in El Dorado Hills, California. And we run this ministry through them. And so you would write a check, not made out to Dan Palmer. You'd make it out to District Church. It would go to the Uganda well account. Of course, you'd have to tell Brett or I that you were sending it, or you would have to say, Water of Jesus Wells or Ugandan well account, because otherwise it's just going to go into their general account. But they do have a line item specifically for this missions work, and you can give it there, and then they'll send you a tax-deductible receipt at the end of the year.
Which, by the way, you were a pastor many years there, and you helped to run the church, right? As kind of co-lead the pastor, and talk a little bit about that so people get a feel for that. And also talk about the inner city Youth for Christ as well, help running that for kids.
District Church really are guys like you, actually, Brett. They're guys who are a little, younger than me, like a decade younger than me, like you are. And I saw potential in them when they were young pastors. And I just started meeting with them and talking about when I was doing Celebration, I had 1,000 college students at our thing. That was like a gigantic deal in our city, where, you have a service of young people that's bigger than most churches in America. And so people knew about it. Any young person had attended it. And so I started to meet with them, and they appreciated it. I said, hey, this is how I ran my ministry. This is what I did. I'd spoke at Hume Lake, the huge Christian camp, for over a decade. And so, I'd kind of built up a reputation and a name, and I wanted to use it to help other people. So I invested with these guys. And so they were like, will you help us plan our church? And so District Church, I'm actually one of the 3 overseers, and I helped them plan. It's their church. It's their thing. I preach, maybe once a quarter there, and I'm one of the overseers. And so they call me when they have problems or questions, and I help them. And there's a lot of things in my life that I try to do like that, where someone says, hey, would you help us with this? And maybe I go, I'm too busy, but it's like, but God opened that door. This is an incredible thing. And the incredible thing that came out of that is this wealth. They said, hey, why don't you do this through us? Now that you're doing this other thing, do it through us. Mm-hmm. And so we're running it through the church, which is incredible.
And the other thing too is Youth for Christ, right? Talk about your service there and running that organization, right?
Yep.
And also the gift of strategy, which I think is also the other gift here. encouragement, all the things, speaking life, getting things done, but also the gift of strategy to strategically be able to bring people together, make things happen. Talk about Youth for Christ real fast, and then we'll finish with the Wells.
Okay, Youth for Christ is very separate from the Wells, but that was working with inner city youth. We had teen centers in the poorest parts of Sacramento, where I felt that students had the greatest need. It was a large nonprofit, and I figured, hey, I know how to. I love people. I know a lot of business leaders, a lot of people that are generous. And so they helped fund us to take kids to camp. A lot of it was like feeding kids in America, which sounds so weird, but kids that don't have a safe place to go. We had a lot of kids that would live in, they live in motels, a week at a time, a month at a time, and it might be a single mom and 7 kids, and then, different guys passing through. And so home's not safe. Home's not a safe place for the kids. And so they'd go to school and they'd come to the teen center, and we would feed them, give them a place to do their homework, invest in their lives, provide a lot of fun too. And then we'd drive them home at like 8 or 9, and they'd just go home and go to sleep and go back to school, kept them out of the house. And so that was just something that I really wanted to do outside the walls of the church, that was just geared towards reaching into the lives of kids that I felt were a lot like me growing up. And I could see the potential in them and building their lives. In terms of, the strategy of the Wells, obviously strategy is a huge, important part of anything that you do, but an important strategy for me is that I developed the Ugandan leaders to lead this ministry in their country. And so Pastor David Balbaikubo, when I met him, he was in his mid-20s. And he was always embarrassed because they're very much an age culture where respect comes with age. America's kind of lost that piece, but for there it's really important. As a young guy, he just didn't have a lot of authority, and yet God kept using him. And I always call him an American Ugandan, because if you've been to third world countries, everything's a lot slower. But Pastor David's not slow. You go, hey, people need to be baptized. We'll be here tomorrow with 10 trucks, and everyone and he just does it and gets after it. I loved that about him. He said, oh, we're going to do a sports day. He got the Ugandan Cranes, the national soccer team, to come to play against the regional teams. We had over 2,500 Ugandans come out to watch the game, and then we were able to, share our testimonies and declare the gospel to them. It was really awesome. But he's that kind of a leader, and so the Well guys from his church, so we let them run it. He's become a government official because of these wells. If you can imagine, people were like, 40 wells in this region? What's going on over there? And there's this young Ugandan guy that's managing 40 pastors who a well's been installed for their community. And, they're being ministered to from this one guy. And all of a sudden there's a, 1,000-person Ugandan church that before was 4 sticks in the ground with a tarp. And so he's just and I want to continue doing that. And so if you're a business leader and you're good at training or teaching, what I tell a lot of my business, they're like, hey, I don't want to go and, I don't want to do VBS. I don't want to do a building project. What do I have to offer? I'm like, come talk to them about business. Come talk to a guy with no education that's running a 1,000-person church that's put 40 wells in now, that's a government official. Teach him how to make sustainable income for his community. These churches are still investing in the church. It puts him in a tough spot. If you could just imagine being him, and all of a sudden you have this vision and you build a school, in the first year there's 40 kids in it, and then all of a sudden there's 100. And now, we're 9 years down the road, there's 650 kids. And you've got these American churches that are funding these kids. And if they decide, hey, we have a different priority this year, we want to do this other thing, what do? He has no way to get that kind of money on his own, but he could. Someone from America could come and say, hey, let's work out a way to get cell towers here. Let's figure out how to do solar in this area. Let's figure out, we'll help you get a government contract to help this rural. There's a lot of ways that people can come in, even if it's chicken farm, milk production, just something that he can mobilize all of these people that are now under his leadership. They're willing to work. They're the hardest workers ever. This school is unbelievable the way they work, and they're basically doing it as a ministry. And so I bring people out and I say, hey, share your wisdom, share your knowledge. You get outside of your box of all the resource we have in America and think, man, if I was in a rural place that literally had nothing, if you imagine going back in time 200 years in America and going, what kind of business would I make work? That's a huge help to them to continue to build on what they've already done there. And so strategically, I think that's a big part.
Awesome. I love it. Running out of time here, so kind of just wrap it up. So if anyone's listening right now and you want to be a part of this and you want to give, if you're any of my deferred sales trust clients and you want to find out a way to creatively give as well, I want you to reach out to me, email me, call me, and then you can also reach out to Dan as well. It's Brett at capitalgainstaxsolutions.com or Dan at capitalgainstaxsolutions.com. And that being said, Dan, you ready for the lightning round? Because we're out of time.
I'm ready.
All right. So knowing what you know now, if you could go take one golden nugget, you tell yourself at 20 years old, what's the one thing you tell yourself to do?
Never be too afraid to follow where God leads.
Excellent. Question number 2, what's the number one book you've recommended or gifted the most in the past year?
Disciplines of a Godly Man by R. Kent Hughes. And mostly because I grew up in a fatherless home. And if you were blessed to grow up with a father in your house, you might not have even noticed that he was investing wisdom into you during the year, when you're out throwing a ball around, when you're telling him about your first date. And for me, not having those, I purposefully seek after people that can help move me forward in terms of the things that matter in this life.
Perfect. Question number 3. What are you most curious about right now?
Most curious about how to navigate the empty nester stage. I got 2 kids in college and one's 15. How do I impact their lives now that I have boys and they're moving outside of the house? I want to be great at that.
Excellent. And then the last question, after all your success, helping all the people you've helped, what's the best way that you stay centered in your values, stay faithful, and stay encouraged to charge forward to reach even higher heights?
I always remind myself you can't live off yesterday's manna. That's an Old Testament story where Israel had to trust God to give them new food every day. And if they stored it, it would rot overnight. And I would say, whatever I've done in my past, I can't live off that. I need to create new experiences, new impacts today. I can't live off yesterday's manna. I'd have to have new manna for tomorrow.
And Dan, I just want to thank you for being on the show, sharing your heart, being faithful to the Lord, doing all of the good work you've done, and growing so much and helping so many other people to grow and make an impact. I want to encourage you to keep doing that, keep pouring in, keep pushing forward, and keep doing the things that you're doing to really help more people, especially people in Uganda with the water of Jesus wells. Also want to thank all of our listeners for listening to another episode of the Build It to Billions podcast. We're also streaming on Capital Gains Tax Solutions podcast as well, just in case you're curious. And we believe a lot of folks want to make a big difference and make a big impact. And here at Capital Gains Tax Solutions as well, we exist to unlock capital gains, to multiply freedom and impact. And this is just one way that you could be a part of that with us and part of our heart and our value here at Capital Gains Tax Solutions. So I encourage you to share this with somebody, reach out to somebody, and consider giving, being with us. Okay, appreciate everyone watching, and we'll talk to everyone again real soon. Bye now.